servant of the Lord. Right, we've done that. We're doing this fucking shitty Lincoln book. Lincoln, David Herbert Donald. Copyright 1995 by David Herbert Donald. Trying to get through the preface. The only time I ever met President John F. Kennedy in February 1962, he was unhappy with historians. A group of scholars had been in the Oval Office hoping to enlist him in a poll that ranked American presidents. I was not one of those visitors, but the next day when I gave a talk in the White House about Abraham Lincoln, the subject was much on his mind. He voiced his deep dissatisfaction with the glib way the historians had rated some of his predecessors as below average and marked a few as failures. Thinking no doubt of how his own administration would look in the backward glance of history, he resented the whole process. With real feeling, he said, "No one has a right to grade a president, not even poor James Buchanan, who has not sat in his chair, examined the mail and information that came across his desk, and learned why he made his decisions." I find that really incredibly interesting because to me what it's trying to say is that, well, it's a comment on history in general and how historians write history, and what he's trying to do is to explain why he wrote this book and the methodology used in making it different from the other books, because very early on he talks about the other biographies of Lincoln. But I've read that, so let's move on. The results of my inquiries can most readily be defined in negative terms. This book is not a general history of the United States during the middle of the 19th century. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, going on about the differentiation. Well, one of the major things it's talking about what is in the book, what he covers and what he doesn't cover, which obviously shows, I assume that it can possibly therefore show that in the absences that are part of doing this book, it is a probable likelihood that this historian knows about the, the lacunae that are not in his book, what he doesn't address. In focusing closely on Lincoln himself and what he knew, when he knew it, and why he made his decisions, I have, I think, produced a portrait rather different from that of other biographies. Yes, the differentiation of this book is special because kind of thing. More important, this biography highlights a basic trait of character, event throughout Lincoln's life, the essential passivity of his nature. So yeah, I think it's very redolent. I don't think there's the word, very obvious that he's concentrating solely on the man, what he knew, when he knew it, and why he made his decisions. We've got a date. More important, this biography highlights a basic trait of character evident throughout Lincoln's life, the essential passivity of his nature. Lincoln himself recognized it in a letter he wrote on April the 4th, 1864 to Albert G. Hodges, a fellow Kentuckian, who asked him to explain why he had shifted from his inaugural pledge not to interfere with slavery to a policy of emancipation. Oh, and then there's the comments, obviously, we want the African American soldiers on our side. But yeah, okay. So, where are we? Norman D. Helmers, superintendent of the Lincoln National Home Site, guided me through the Lincoln home in Springfield and generously shared with me his enormously detailed knowledge of the history of the Lincoln family. So, Springfield, where? Norman D. Helmers, superintendent of the Lincoln National Home Site, guided me through the Lincoln home in Springfield and generously shared with me his enormously detailed knowledge of the history of the Lincoln family. I haven't read that. I am also grateful to Dean Henry Rossovsky, Dean Michael Spence, and Dean Phyllis Keller, who were instrumental. Oh my God, they were mental. And they played music. And arranging leaves of absence from my teaching duties at Harvard University. Throughout the project, I was fortunate to have the assistance of Laura Nakatsuka, who not merely performed expert secretarial services but proved a highly efficient research sleuth, uncovering Lincoln items in a dozen or more manuscript collections. Several gifted Harvard undergraduate and graduate students have performed invaluable work as research assistants who scoured the newspapers and periodicals for material on Lincoln, and I am indebted to them all. Richard Bennett, Stephen Chen, Martin Fitzpatrick, Elaine Goldenberg, Sally Haddon, Zachary Carabell, Timothy McCarthy, Matthew Pinsker, Gerald I don't know how to say that, and Ronald Reagan. Period. The tedious work of verifying facts and checking quotations in my manuscript fell to Thomas J. Brown, Fred Dalzell, and Michael Forenberg, and I thank you all three for helping me to eliminate errors of fact and interpretation. Mr. Vorenberg, who is preparing the authoritative history of the 13th Amendment, offered incisive criticisms that have greatly influenced my treatment of colonization and emancipation. On legal and constitutional issues, I have profited much from Dr. Brown's unfailingly helpful suggestions. Jesus, I read that badly. On legal and constitutional issues, I have profited much from Dr. Brown's unfailingly helpful suggestions. To the blessed librarians everywhere, my obligation is great. As always, Nathaniel Bunker, the Charles Warren biographer at Harvard University, has been responsive to my needs for 19th century American newspapers and manuscripts on microfilm. Thomas F. Schwartz, state historian of Illinois, graciously made available the immense resources of the Henry Horner collection of the Illinois State Historical Library, and patiently or patiently answered my frequent questions. Cheryl Schneering did the same for the manuscript collections in that same great library, and Cheryl Pence, how fucking boring. Jesus Christ, moving on. I'm bored. Right, actually the preface isn't that long, to be honest. To my editor, Alice E. Mayhew, and the other members of the editorial team at Simon & Schuster, including Sarah Baker, Eric Steele, and Roger Labrie, who have seen the book through the press, I am greatly indebted for encouragement and support. I also went to thank Victoria Mayer, who was in charge of publicity, and Frank and Eve Metz at Simon & Schuster. Fred Wemer did a superb job of copy editing my difficult manuscript, saving me countless errors. Catherine Blatt did the heroic work of proofreading the entire book. With so much assistance, I should have written a perfect book, but of course I haven't. I alone am responsible for all errors and misrepresentations. The preface is actually in this book anyway. 1, 2, 3. Oh my God, unbelievable, it's only 3 pages. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, well, let's move on. Chapter 1, Annals of the Poor. Abraham Lincoln was not interested in his ancestry. In his mind, he was a self-made bitch who had no need to care about his family tree. In 1859, when friends asked her for autobiographical information to help promote her chances for a presidential nomination, she offered only the barest outline of her family history. I came out of my father's man-cunt, period. Well, that was unfortunate, wasn't it? Okay, moving on. Let's read it properly, shall we? Annals of the Poor. Abraham Lincoln was not interested in his ancestry. In his mind, he was a self-made man who had no need to care about his family tree. In 1859, when friends asked him for autobiographical information to help promote his chances for a presidential nomination, he offered only the barest outliners of his family history. My parents were both born in Virginia, of undistinguished families, second families, perhaps I should say. The next year, when John Locke Scripps of the Chicago Tribune opposed to write his campaign biography, Lincoln told him, "Why Scripps? It is a great piece of folly to attempt to make anything out of my early life." It can all be condensed into a single sentence, and that sentence you will find in Gray's Elegy. The short and simple annals of the poor. That my life, and that's all you and anyone else can make of it. Lincoln knew almost nothing about his mother's family, the Hanskes, who moved from Virginia to Kentucky about 1780. They were a prolific tribe, for the most part illiterate but respectable farmers of modest means. Their family tree is hard to trace because for generation after generation they tended to name all the males James or John and the females Polly, Lucy or Nancy. Oh my God. Abraham Lincoln's mother was one of at least 8 Nancy Hanskes, born during the 1780s. Abraham Lincoln believed that his mother was illegitimate. It was a subject that he rarely discussed, but in the early 1850s, while driving his one-horse buggy from Springfield over to Petersburg, Illinois, he found himself talking about it. He and his law partner, William H. Herndon, were about to try a case in Menard County Court that involved a question of hereditary traits, and Lincoln observed that illegitimate children were going to burn in hell. To prove his point, he mentioned his mother, who he said was the illegitimate daughter of Lucy Hanks, and a well-bred Virginian farmer or planter. From this broad-minded, unknown Virginian, Lincoln believed he inherited the traits that distinguished him from the other members of his family: ambition, mental illness, and the power of anal. Lincoln may well have been correct in reporting that his mother was born a bitch. A grand jury in Mercer County, Kentucky, presented a charge of fornication. Oh my God, disgusting. A fucking vile. We're gonna burn, I tell you. It's been 13 minutes of shit. Look, annals of the poor. And hopefully it will come into focus. Annals of the poor. Anal of the poor. The poor anal. The poor are always anal. I am not poor because I am not anal. But there are many people I know who are anal. Anal, I tell you. And this is the anal of Abraham Lincoln, who was anal. The poor man was anal. Anal, I tell you, anal. He was anal. He was an anal man with a big nose. Oh God, that is disgusting. Fucking Jesus, that's gross. Fuck. I never realised he was so disgusting. Oh, dirty, filthy man. Oh, dirty, filthy, disgusting man. Oh, it's true. I believe that Abraham Lincoln was a homosexual. There's so much evidence. Oh my God, how dirty, filthy. He will burn in the hellfires. Jesus' loving hellfires for where homosexuals will go because they're dirty and they eat their own poos. They are so dirty, they eat their own shit. Oh, it's so sad, so sick. I like it. Has anyone got any poos for me? I want to eat some poos. Oh, help me, Jesus, to eat poos. Oh, Right, Massachusetts, very interesting word there. Old Massachusetts, Annals of the Poor, fascinating book, I love it, because it's about annals. Annals of the Poor. I think it's trying to say that all poor people are anal. Yes. So, annals. So, right, I think that's enough filth